We have about 2 more minutes, but I could probably go ahead and start. I think everybody is going to be here is here. Does everyone have an outline and a business card? That my friend Val, that's my friend Val Lewis from my church back there.
I know.
She came with me from Washington yesterday on the plane, and she's very interested in apologetics, so it's nice to have her here. And I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to speak to you. I'm Marcia Montenegro. This thing has stuck to everything except my shirt. It was on my napkin at dinner. And it's been on my scarf. It's been on my arm. It's like everywhere except my shirt. So
well, now we know who you are.
Now you can tell.
We're going to make sure this is recorded, whoever does this. Or,
yeah. Who's going to make sure?
I don't know. I just didn't want it to get forgotten before we started.
So should I not start?
I'll set it up for you.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I don't know how it works or anything, so I can't do it.
I just figured it out today.
Oh, okay. Well, I couldn't figure it out either. I don't think. I'm sure I could. Thank you. So now it's working?
Yeah.
I've never seen one like that. Okay. So I'll start again for the recording. This is Marcia Montenegro, and this workshop is Astrology and the Age of Aquarius, New Age Spiritual Revolution or Evolution. So you could read it both ways. And I'm very happy to have you here. I am a former professional licensed astrologer. I was an astrologer for 8 years professionally. I actually started 2 years earlier practicing on people and in order to learn. Then I took a 7-hour exam in the city of Atlanta. They actually had it set up, and the astrologers set this up with Congressman, at the time, Congressman White Fowler, who's now deceased. But they set it up because it was illegal. It was classified as fortune-telling. And they said this isn't fair because we're not really, we're not doing fortune-telling like the scam artist, and we're not making stuff up. This is a really valid, science. This is what the astrologers were saying. And they said what we'll do is we'll make a requirement. Let's make a requirement so that anybody who calls themselves an astrologer in the city limits has to prove they really know astrology. So that will keep out the scam artists. So what they did was they said we'll have them take a test to prove that they know astrology. And they could either take the American Federation of Astrologers test, the AFA, or they could take the astrology exam set up in the city of Atlanta by the Board of Astrology Examiners, and the test was given through the city, and you had to go to City Hall to take the test. So you went to City Hall to take a 7-hour exam on astrology. And then the exams were sent to the astrologers on the Board of Astrology Examiners, and the astrologers graded it and then gave the results to the city. And then the city sent the letters out to the people that took the test. Now, okay, I wanted to give all that to you to give you an idea of how serious people who do astrology take it, and how they're not just making stuff up, and you can actually be tested on it. And I took that exam in 1983 and passed. Now, a little bit later, I was one of the 3 people on the Board of Astrology Examiners, and then I was on the board 4 years and chairperson for the last 3 years. And every time we gave the test, we gave it yearly. Each year, about half the people would fail. So only half the people that took it when I was on the board passed. Because it was hard. You had to know math. You had to know how to compute the chart mathematically without using a device. And so that meant you had to memorize the formulas. And you had to know how to interpret a chart. So that was the way astrology was. Now that's very unusual. I don't know any other city that's quite like that. Supposedly, I've heard Las Vegas has some kind of licensing requirement, but I don't know anything about it. So anyway, a lot of people don't know about that. And I happened to be living in Atlanta when I got interested, I was living there when I got into the New Age and then into Eastern religions first. And then I'd always been interested in astrology, and so I started studying astrology because there were astrologers there who taught astrology. So I could even tell you more. I have to really cut back on what I want to say because I had a lot of interesting experiences as an astrologer. Now, what I want to focus on tonight, and let me say one more thing. I have a ministry, Christian Answers for the New Age. The Lord, out of His mercy and graciousness, saved me from the New Age and astrology, and that's a kind of a long story, so I can't tell it to you, but it is on my website, which is on. It's not on the first page, but it's on all the other pages. It's ChristianAnswersForTheNewAge.org. So my story is there. If you go to the home page, there's a little paragraph that says welcome, and it says if you want to read Marcia's story, and you can click on it, and it has more detail. Because if I was going to really tell it to you, I would need at least 20 minutes. So anyway, because it wasn't like an overnight story. It wasn't like one thing that happened. It was a series of events that brought me to faith in Christ. And I did not want to be a Christian. I was not somebody who was tired of astrology or the New Age. I was not like wanting a relationship with Christ. I was not seeking God. I mean, I really didn't want to be. I actually didn't want to be a Christian, which is really strange. But it was very, very. It was like almost like a. It was kind of like God was. I don't know. It's like God's sense of humor because I was so averse to becoming a Christian, and then I actually became a Christian. I don't know. To me, it's funny, but okay. I better stop talking. All right. So, astrology is extremely popular. Usually there's a consistent 33% or more belief in astrology when they do polls in the United States. And its popularity, of course, comes from birth dates tied to the Zodiac signs. People love to read and learn about themselves. And astrology is part of other esoteric systems as well. It can be used with tarot cards. It's used in the Kabbalah. It's used with numerology, spell casting, and magical rituals. So it's kind of part of the whole occult scene. Now, these people who do other things like the Kabbalah or numerology may not be astrologers, but it's tied into it, so they know enough to use it usually. And by the way, I have an article on the Kabbalah on my website if you want to read more about that. I have lots of articles on my website, so that's one of the many. So these are the areas I want to address. Where does Western astrology come from? What is astrology? What is the astrological New Age worldview? What is the Age of Aquarius and the response to that? And why are New Agers excited about it? And what does the Bible say about astrology? So the way astrology started, and we don't have real clear records on this. A lot of it is just from reading ancient documents. The Bible addresses it. But it does. The word astrology is a modern word, so there isn't a Hebrew word for astrology. The Hebrew uses terms like dividing the sky up or monthly prognostication. So, you can tell they're talking about astrology, but there isn't like a Hebrew word for astrology, just to let you know. So it was a part of what we call astronomy, which of course did not really exist then either. It's a science. And what it was they were the one and the same thing. People were looking at the movements, they were looking at the stars, and they were looking at the movements of these planets. And they noticed, of course, the planets, which they didn't know were planets, they thought they were stars, were moving a lot faster than the fixed stars. And they're moving in a cycle. And they would notice, now it's been 2 years and now Mars is back in the same place. Or it's been 7 years and now Saturn is back in the same place. And Mars is near the sun, and the last time Mars was near the sun, our enemies attacked us. And they started correlating these positions and movements of the planets with things on Earth. But they believed that these planets, they often tied them to the pagan gods. So they were the gods or the homes of gods. Like the name Marduk. I hope I look good in that picture. I usually have my mouth open. The name Marduk is a god, a pagan god, and it's also the term used for the planet Jupiter. Because Jupiter was the biggest planet, so it was connected to, strength and power. So Jupiter was kind of a royal planet. And at the time that this was going on, where they were observing these things, they had the constellations, Aries and Taurus and Gemini. Those were also part of myths and pagan beliefs. Now, of course, those names are, we have Greek and Latin names for those. But the Babylonians, which is probably the first record that we have of this, had Babylonian names for things. Originally, astrology was only for rulers and kings. But in late Greek culture, wealthy Greeks decided that they wanted individual forecasting for their children. So when a wealthy Greek family had a baby, they wanted to know about its fate, and they would get an astrologer to do the personal kind of forecasting that's usually done for kings. And this was called horoscope. Horoscope comes from watcher of the hour. That's what it means. And this was the first individualized astrological charts were done by the Greeks. Now, I don't have all the time periods for this. I'm not an expert on the history, but I'm just giving you a general background. And so, for a long time, you had astrology developing over the centuries. In the Middle Ages, it had a certain kind of way that it was done. It was tied into medicine, into diagnosing people. They would use astrology to diagnose people. And it was kind of fatalistic. It was very fatalistic. And now keep in mind, I'm talking about Western astrology. I'm not talking about Vedic astrology, which is astrology in India. And I'm not talking about Chinese astrology and Native American astrology, because those are very, very different systems. I don't know the history of them. They develop differently, and they're done differently. The closest one to Western astrology is probably the astrology from India. But even that is done differently and interpreted somewhat differently. For example, in Western astrology, the sun takes a central position, whereas in Vedic astrology, it's the moon. And there's other differences, too, in how they calculate. So it's very complicated. But I'm focusing on astrology in the West, and of course, what I know best is in the United States. So, so now we get to the 20th century. We're skipping all the other centuries. We're getting to the 20th century because this is more relevant. And so a lot of what astrology absorbed in the 20th century, it absorbed beliefs from Theosophy, spiritualism, and Eastern beliefs coming to the West. And this included reincarnation and karma, and impersonal God force, spiritual evolvement through many lives. Now, not all astrologers necessarily have these views, and not all of them necessarily, for example, believe in reincarnation. You'll have astrologers who don't, who are just strictly interpreting the chart, and they're not putting reincarnation in it. There are astrologers who claim to be Christian. So, what I say here is not necessarily going to be true for everybody who does astrology, but this is generally true, and it's certainly true in the New Age, okay, which is what I was involved in. And Theosophy, I don't know do all of you know what Theosophy is? Does anybody know what Theosophy is?
Helena Petrovna Blavatsky.
He knows the whole name.
Yeah, the big book.
Are you the only one that knows? Does anybody else know? No, really? I think you're the only one.
The fountainhead of all New Age occultism in this century, basically.
Yeah, Theosophy was a big forerunner of the New Age. It still exists. and it was founded by Madame Blavatsky, and it basically, she took some Eastern ideas and she claimed to get these teachings from what she called the masters, these masters that were disembodied. And she started a group, and she got followers all over the world. It was really, really huge in the late 1800s and into the early 20th century. There's a very, very good book on it. If you want to know about it, it's not a Christian book, but it's an excellent book, and it's a critical look. It's not written by a fan of Theosophy. It's called Madame Blavatsky's Baboon. I know that's a really strange title. He explains in there why he's calling it that, and it's by a man named Peter Washington. And it's not only interesting, it's funny. It's very funny because some of the stories of the people in Theosophy are very entertaining. Just because some of them were kind of, they were very power hungry, and they were always having fights with each other, and a lot of them would be in Theosophy. A lot of other movements started in Theosophy, and by followers who left and started their own groups, like Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff left and started his own group. And have you heard of the Walton schools?
Rudolf Steiner, Anthroposophy.
Oh, Steiner, I'm sorry, Steiner, but he was in it too.
Right, he left.
Yeah, and Gurdjieff was in it. I always get them mixed up. Both of them started their own movements.
Right.
Rudolf Steiner started Anthroposophy, and he was in Theosophy, and he started his own movement, and that was the schools.
I think about Ouspensky and the Fourth Way.
Yes, and Ouspensky was another one, and something called the Fourth Way. Now these, you may think, well, this doesn't have anything to do with us because this was like, way back then. But actually, these movements continue to have followers, and you can't always identify them. For example, Steiner has followers. I mean, he's dead, of course, but there are groups, Steiner groups, all over. I know I'm getting off the topic here. Okay, I've got to watch it because I do this. There are groups in the United States, but they call themselves Christians, but they're followers of Steiner. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about that. All right, so...
That's okay. We might run into those people.
You might.
Yeah,
you might.
they're in that
I
group.
posted on it on Facebook. And,
live around here.
I'm sorry, what?
You will if you live around here. The Theosophical Society is headquartered in Wheaton, the bastion of Christian Orthodoxy. Every year they have a Theosophist that has thousands of people who did outreach there.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Theosophic counseling, does that have to do with
That's theophostic.
Okay, it's different.
It's different from theosophy. Yeah, the words sound very much alike.
It's still
I have
Celtic,
issues
though.
with theophostic, but I won't go into that. Okay. All right. So astrology kind of absorbs a lot from the culture it's in. So it took these views, it took psychology, and Carl Jung was a major influence on astrology, and still is. And actually there are Jungian psychologists who became astrologers. And I mean, some of the astrology books I read as an astrologer were written by psychologists who were Jungian psychologists. Because his idea of the archetype, that we all are kind of connected, we're all connected through sort of one mind in a way, and there are these archetypes, and he felt that the planets represented these models of human behavior and human personality, and that's how we connect, is through those archetypes. And that's used, he used astrology to explain that. Now, astrology used to be more fatalistic, but partly because of psychology, it got more focused, it got less fatalistic and more focused on the individual's potentials and the individual's talents in the charts and their ability to make choices. The outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are usually interpreted as representations of a collective unconscious. In other words, because the outer planets move much more slowly. They don't move as fast as like Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And because they move more slowly, there's not a real measurable thing going on in the chart. I have sort of a representation of a chart here. I didn't put all the planets in, but so at your birth, okay, what happens is the planets are calculated to fall. They fall in a circle, and they're falling in this pattern, zodiac pattern, and You have Aries, Taurus. I just put Aries over here. It would depend on the time of day you're born. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and it goes on around. And then the planets might be, the sun might be over here. Okay, this is divided into 12, kind of like a pie, 12 pieces of the pie, but these are called houses. So you might have the sun here, you might have Mercury here. Oops, I forgot part of Venus. Okay, that's supposed to be Venus. You might have Venus here. Okay, you might have Neptune here. Well, over the course of the person's life, Neptune may go, from here to here. Maybe, not even that much. So how are you going to interpret that? Because it's hardly moving. Whereas these other planets are going to be changing around as you look at what's going on in the person's life. So the outer planets became more representations of a collective unconscious of what's going on in humanity. Now, it can be interpreted, and it is interpreted individually, but it's usually how it's influencing other things in the chart. So it's actually this very complicated esoteric system, which is what the occult is like. This is like what the occult is. And now I think I put a note by Pluto here because Pluto's not supposed to really be a planet anymore. I think they call it a dwarf planet, and it's disputed by astronomers, but it continues to be interpreted in chart by astrologers. They still, as far as I can tell, they're still using Pluto. Okay, so I'm going to move on to page 2, or we're never going to get done here. All right. What is astrology? Well, it's not astronomy, which is a scientific study, of course, of heavenly bodies in space. Astrology is seeing hidden meanings. I think I just dropped my ring. Astrology sees hidden meanings in the planets. Okay, it's looking at a meaning there. And this is what we call divination. Astrology is a tool of divination. Divination is seeking information beyond normal means by reading hidden meanings in ordinary patterns, okay, like astrology, tarot cards, palm reading, the I Ching, etc., and or by accessing or consulting a spirit, energy, force through a paranormal practice. This could be like being a psychic, or you're looking into a mirror or a body of water, spirit contact, etc. All of this is a form of divination. And of course, in the Bible, divination is denounced in many, many places. Astrology is esoteric. It means that's resting on the belief that planets and zodiac signs hold hidden meanings relevant to the person's life and to humanity as a whole. All right. Let me go on down here. Let me give you a little bit on New Age worldviews, because astrology and New Age worldviews are very close. It's very much connected for the most part. So a lot of astrologers have New Age thinking. God is an energy from which we all come and to which we all return. Jesus was not unique, but was one of many advanced spiritual teachers. Jesus was the avatar of the age of Pisces, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. People evolve spiritually through many lives to learn their lessons. People have a divine nature or essence which must be realized. There is no sin, or sin is redefined as not realizing your own divinity, and or ignorance of the illusory nature of the world. People do not need redemption or a savior. They need awakening to their true divine self, and there are no absolutes. Now that's just a kind of a summary. There's more to it than that, but those are kind of major beliefs in the New Age. I had all of these beliefs. I believed in all of these. These were all part of my worldview. And I really believed they were true. I totally believed in it, and I would defend it to people who didn't. What is the Age of Aquarius? Now what we're getting into here, we're kind of departing from the individual style astrology where the astrologer's talking to a client and giving them information on their birth chart, all right, where you say things like, oh, your sun is in the first house, so you really need to express yourself. Because the first house is the house of the sun. It's ruled by Aries, and so, Aries is Mars, I'm sorry. But the sun, actually the sun is not the first house. It's kind of good that I'm forgetting my astrology. The sun's really the fifth house. Okay, the sun is the fifth house. But it's true, the sun is the ego. If it's in the first house, you're going to want to express yourself very strongly. So that's the kind of thing an astrologer might say to somebody. Or they might say, oh, if Jupiter's up here, that means you really want to expand your horizons, so you want to study or you want to travel. These are just little examples I'm giving you. But now what we're getting into is something called the ages, or the Earth ages. And the age of Aquarius is an Earth age. And these Earth ages represent the Earth's journey through a particular zodiac sign, and they last about 2,000 years. And it's calculated based on the orientation of the Earth's North Pole towards the constellations. And due to the Earth's orbit and the astronomical data, these ages move through the zodiac in reverse order. So instead of Aries, Taurus, Gemini, you know, the normal order of the zodiac, it's reversing. So we're going from Pisces. I put Pisces down here. This isn't the normal place for Pisces. I was just doing a random thing. We're going, instead of going this way, we're going this way. So it was Taurus and it was Aries. Pisces, now it's into the age of Aquarius. So that's what's happening. That's why Pisces is coming before Aquarius, which normally doesn't happen. And the age of Pisces began around the time of Christ's birth. And this is why Jesus is perceived as the avatar of the age of Pisces. I do have an article on this on my website called The Piscean Jesus, which is all about Jesus being the avatar of the age of Pisces and how to respond to this. Because there are lots of ways where it can look like he really fits the age of Pisces. Okay, like Pisces is a sign of the fish. Well, Jesus talked about fish a lot. The fish sign was used to represent Jesus Christ. You know, I mean, you can get these kind of superficial things that you pick up and say, see, that really fits Jesus as the avatar of the age of Pisces. Now, do you all know what an avatar is? I should stop and... You do? What is it? Do you want to say?
Isn't it just like a representation, a visual representation?
That's a computer terminology, yeah. But does anyone know the Hindu meaning? Do you know?
Isn't it kind of like, it's like the same spirit just possessing like a different body, like that kind of idea?
You've got the idea of it. You've got the idea of it. It's from Hinduism, and it's the incarnations of the god Vishnu. That's what an avatar is. And the New Age took that term before it was a computer term, and it took that term avatar, and in the New Age it means a spiritually evolved being who is able to manifest in a body on earth at will. And so Jesus is considered an avatar. Now, not by all astrologers, but this is very popular. And it's not just astrologers I'm talking about. I'm also talking about New Agers. This is a lot of New Agers have this view, and they may not know astrology very well at all. So, Jesus has this position as the avatar. And because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, it's seen as the sign of dissolution. Aries is the first sign. It's the beginning. It's the spark of fire. It's the spark of life that everything comes from. And then it goes through all the different stages. And when it gets to Pisces, it's the sign of dissolution, where the self dissolves into a universal connection to everything, into universal love. It's the opposite of Aries is seen as selfish. Pisces is seen as selflessness. You know, so unselfish, loving, universal love. So people say in the New Age, well, Jesus did teach love, and he taught this universal love. He came to show us the universal love of Pisces. He was teaching the essence of Pisces. So that's why he's the avatar of the age of Pisces. So they connect this teaching about love, and he sacrificed himself. Pisces is also the sign of sacrifice. So he sacrificed himself out of love. Now, they don't usually agree with the part about dying to atone for sins. It's more like this kind of, he was showing his love through this sacrifice. And that's very Piscean. So what's the age of Aquarius? And most people probably agree that we are now in the age of Aquarius. It's not an overnight thing, it's sort of a process. But probably most people would say we're in here, or at least the beginning of it. Now, these are characteristics of the age of Aquarius. Universal peace, brotherhood, and equality. People use special powers of the mind. Advanced technology runs everything smoothly. That's because Aquarius is ruled by the planet Uranus, which is connected to the Industrial Revolution when it was discovered. And the planet Uranus, so, is connected to invention and technology, as well as rebellion and nonconformity. So, there you go for technology. Gender has been transcended. Androgyny is sometimes considered the ideal, but gender is sort of transcended in Aquarius. People act for the good of the group, but tolerate individual differences. These, of course, are the ideals. The outer teacher has been replaced by the inner teacher. And here's a quote from New Age writer Marianne Williamson in her book, The Age of Miracles, Embracing the New Midlife. If, in fact, the highest, most creative work is the work of consciousness, then in slowing down, we're not doing less. We're doing more. Having slowed down physically, we're in a better space to rev up psychically. I guess she's talking about people in midlife. We are shifting from the outer to the inner, not in order to begin our demise, but to reseed and regreen the consciousness of the planet. Now, this statement, if you've never read a New Age book or anything, this is a very New Age kind of statement. This is like New Age talk. And you may be reading and thinking, what the heck is this saying? Do any of you feel that way when you read it? Are you kind of like, what? I'm reading, I know English, but this doesn't make sense. It's all because the New Age has all these meanings and phrases in their words. And if you don't really know what the New Age is about, or you don't know the language, you cannot see what they're really saying.
It's like Orwellian doublespeak.
Yes, it's very much Orwellian. And this is one of the big dangers of the New Age today, is that it uses familiar language, but it means something else by it. And this is really a big danger, because it will talk about spiritual things or Jesus or God or love, but the meaning is not the normal meaning, and it's not the Christian meaning. Okay, so, but this is what they believe. We are shifting from the outer to the inner teacher. Now, how do you respond to this? Because when you look at it, you think, well, yeah, people do talk about universal peace. You do hear about things, developing psychic powers. We do have all this. We're in this age of technology and digital things, and almost everyone, I don't have a smartphone, but almost everyone, I'm one of 15 people in the United States that doesn't have a smartphone. I just really don't need it right now anyway. And gender, look at the gender issue. Look at the transgender and all the gender stuff going on. So people are like, well, see, I can really see. This is the age of, I can see the Aquarius theme here. So here's some responses to that. Okay, technology as it is was not foreseen by astrologers in the past. It's only since Uranus was discovered and assigned as the planet of Aquarius that a correlation was made between Uranus and technology. Initially, it corresponded to the Industrial Revolution when it was discovered. Okay, so they didn't predict all this. They didn't predict any of the digital stuff through knowing about the Age of Aquarius. It's only after it's happened, The interest in gender issues is not new. Ancient pagan and Eastern religions had and have gods who are androgynous and or hermaphrodites, both sexes, or change from one gender to the other. This is not unusual in pagan religions. In fact, the word hermaphrodite comes from the name of a Greek god. And then I'm not going to read all this, but I have some excerpts here below from different websites that show you this. For example, the second one, in polytheistic cultures, it is common to see entities that are male and female simultaneously, especially in creation myths. This unity of opposites is a central category of dialectics and can be viewed as a philosophical, metaphysical, or scientific concept. And then the next one, in Hinduism, there's a deity I'm not going to try to say the name, that is half Shiva, half Shakti, Shiva's male and Shakti's female, represents the inseparable masculine and feminine energies that are the roots of creation. And I have another one that's from China. And in fact, there's a Wikipedia page called LGBT Themes in Mythology. So there you go, right there. And then I just have some more quotes there that you can look at if you want, to show that it's not like this is suddenly a new thing that we're thinking about these gender things, that people aren't really any gender, or they can be any gender they want. This is not a new idea. The male-female characteristics are part of a concept called polarity found in many pagan beliefs, including astrology. This is often represented by the yin-yang symbol, which symbolizes opposites as complementary and eventually becoming one, light and dark, male-female, white magic, black magic, etc. And in fact, the Egyptian Ankh, the symbol of the Ankh, which looks kind of like a cross, also symbolizes male and female. So this whole male-female polarity and male-female as one is as an occult concept. It's very common in the occult to find this idea. And polarity is in astrology because they say the signs that are opposite each other, like Aries and Libra, are opposite in the Zodiac. And Aries is self and Libra is partnership, like marriage. So you have self and you have the other, being with the other. So they're opposite. But astrology says, but this is also, they're two sides of the same coin. So this concept you find throughout the occult. Special powers of the mind, like ESP and psychic abilities, have been a part of history, just under different names. You have the third eye. Someone is Fae. They have the sixth sense. You had oracles. You had the Greek oracle at Delphi, etc. Nothing characterizing the Age of Aquarius is actually new. It is merely a rebooting, a reappearance of ancient pagan spirituality in new forms. Now, that's my opinion. Okay, nobody in authority said that. Just me. So that is my view. I mean, other people, I think, agree with me, but that's my view on this. Because this is how I would respond to somebody who was trying to prove to me we were in the Age of Aquarius. I wouldn't try to do it as an argument or tear them down. I'd just be like, well, let me give you my response to that. What about this? What about that? Now, I have these other things here about astrology that don't really relate to the Age of Aquarius. How much time do I have? Does anybody know?
7:30.
I have till 7:30? Okay, is the plenary talk at 7:45? Okay, thank you. Gives me a good idea how to pace myself. Are you all wondering about the Magi?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, I will talk about it, and I want to allow time for questions too, so I'll stop here soon to take questions in maybe 10 minutes. Now, the Magi are wise men. They did most likely study the stars, astronomy and astrology, which, like I said, were the same thing. But think about this, because I get asked about this question a lot. That's why I'm discussing it. People always say, well, what about the Magi? Weren't they astrologers? So doesn't that mean astrology is okay? So that's a question I get. Well, first the star led the Magi to King Herod, right? Not to Jesus. And then Herod is told of Micah's prophecy about the birth of Messiah in Bethlehem. And so now Herod and his advisors are made accountable to God for knowing this. Now they know. Here's a prophecy, and here are these people coming to seek this king. So God made them accountable for this. Then verse 9, the star went on before them until it came and stood over where the child was. Now I don't know Greek, so maybe there are different ways of seeing that, but to me it's, a star or planet cannot lead someone to an exact specific spot or stand over that spot. Some believe the star was actually the Shekinah, the supernatural light that revealed the glory of God. So the glory of God had rested on the Christ child, who was the human dwelling of God's presence. And of course, John says Jesus came and tabernacled among us, and you have the parallel, of course, is the tabernacle in the wilderness, and you have the Shekinah, the glory of God that rested on that. So now here's Jesus. It's a parallel. I did not think of this. I heard this in a sermon on the radio when I was a new Christian, and I was sort of grappling with this issue because I had been an astrologer just a short time before. So I'm like, yeah, what about the Magi, you know? And I heard this really good sermon from a preacher, and I am not sure who it was. I think it was Ironside, but I'm not sure, so I can't say it was him. It was some preacher who has been dead for a while, and I happened to hear they had some old radio shows from him. And I thought, wow, that really makes sense. And I think it makes sense. So that's my view. That's how I answer that question. And of course, the Magi's worship of Jesus foreshadowed the Messiah coming for the Gentiles as well as the Jews, which is a theme in Matthew. And the Magi story is only in Matthew. It's not in the other Gospels. And what does the Bible say about astrology? There are people who say astrology is a gift from God, people who do astrology, and say that they believe in God or say they're Christians say this. Jean Dixon used to say this, who had horoscope columns in newspapers all over the country, but she was actually a psychic. She was not an astrologer. Well, first of all, James 1:17 says every good and perfect gift comes from God, not every gift. And many quote Genesis 1:14. Let there be the lights in the expanse of heavens to separate day from night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and days and years. And they interpret that as zodiac signs. Well, no, that's not what it means, because the context is clearly not about that, and the word there used for signs cannot mean zodiac signs. This shows it's used for timing, it's used for light, it's marking time and seasons, and it could also be miraculous signs, such as when the sun was darkened in Egypt, the second coming of Christ, the day of the Lord, you know, the language about the sun being darkened, the moon turning into blood, and the stars falling. So there's a lot of different ways that this word could be used, but it had not with zodiac signs. Astrology's divination prevents one from seeking God's counsel. And Isaiah 47 is probably one of the strongest passages against astrology. It actually is denouncing all occult arts. And it's talking about Babylon. And it's a prophecy against Babylon and denounces astrology in verses 13 to 15. And then there's several passages condemning the worship of the heavenly host and constellations. By the way, anybody getting the recording who doesn't have the outline, if you email me at mmontenegro at f like Frank, I am like Mary.org, I can send you by email. I'll send you a Word doc of the outline, just for people who might get the recording but not have the outline. So,
That email again?
oh, it's let me see, I don't have it on here, do I? Sorry. Oh, it's on my business card. But it's mmontenegro at fim.org. It is on the business card that Val gave you. All right. This is quickly, let me do this. What do you say to people who really believe in this, who believe in the Age of Aquarius or astrology? They really like it. I mean, I've had Christians say, well, if astrology isn't true, you know, I'm a Gemini, and I really do fit Gemini, you know? And I'm a I've had Christians say, oh, well, you know, I did that because I'm Sagittarius. You know, and I'm kind of like, you know, because it's like, wait a minute, you're a Christian. What do you mean you're a Sagittarius? So, you know, how do you respond to this? Okay, first of all, using science is usually not helpful, even though it's true, because astrology, even though it uses mathematical calculations, you know, it makes people think it's scientific. However, it's geocentric. It's based on the Earth being at the center with the planets moving around Earth rather than heliocentric. The zodiac belt also is a fixed artificial pattern that is no longer accurate. So actually, everything's moved backwards several degrees. So, for example, if you think you're a Leo, you could actually be a Cancer. So it's actually not even accurate for a lot of people anymore. Different astrologers use different house systems to calculate the chart, which may result in chart variations. And much of the Jungian psychology used by astrologers has been rejected by modern psychology. Jung himself has been somewhat discredited. This book here, The Aryan Christ by Richard Knoll, is absolutely fantastic. It is such a good book. Well, it was for me. It was so interesting. I want to read it again. And it's about Carl Jung. It's written by a clinical psychologist. It's very, very good. So those are scientific answers, but only if the person's doubting or they're like, well, is science really against this? Otherwise, for astrologers, this doesn't work. They're already aware of all this, and they have answers for it. The Christian response, of course, astrology is divination. It's forbidden. The foundation is belief in reading hidden meanings. And it comes actually from believing in the planets as pagan gods. Astrology looks to creation and not to the creator for guidance. So that's always a big red flag, looking to creation for answers, not to the creator. Practicing astrology leads to contact with fallen angels. I had spirit guides, and all people who are involved in the New Age and the occult have spirit guides. And it's actually kind of a commonly known fact for people who are involved in it. I mean, where you even talk about my guides. Oh yeah, well my guides really helped me on that. Or my guide, they might just reference somebody like the Native American chief, who's my guide. They'll talk about them as individuals. They see them as benevolent, of course. And these guides are fallen angels, but they don't believe that. So these are called, spirit guides. Have you all heard of that term? Mm-hmm. Most of you?
Familiars.
Yeah, or familiars. Yeah, y'all have kind of heard of that. It's very common to have guides, and I would feel sometimes when I was doing the chart, I would start, I would look at the chart, and kind of certain things would jump out at me, and I would start talking, and then as I was talking, it was kind of like I don't know how to explain it, it was like I kind of got pulled into the chart, and I would just feel led, is the best way I know how to put it. I would feel guided through the chart, and it's like there was something going on. It was like an energy between me and the chart, and it was like this flow. And things would come to my mind, and sometimes I'd see things about the person. So sometimes I would know things supernaturally about them that you couldn't really get from the chart, but it happened during the chart reading. And it wasn't something I could have known any other way. So there is a demonic element to astrology. It's not just that it's false, and it's not just that God denounces it, it's demonic. And in Acts 16, when Paul and Barnabas encountered the woman with a spirit of divination, and then, Paul rebukes her, and he casts the demon out from her. Now, I don't think we should conclude from this that everyone who does divination is possessed. I don't think that's the point of the passage. I think the point of the passage, there's several things going on there, but I think one of the points of the passage is that it shows there's a demonic element to divination, that there is something there that's demonic. And so that's what I think is important about that passage as far as doing divination goes. Doing astrology leads to a worldview opposed to the biblical worldview. And horoscope columns, that's a cap from another bottle. Okay, I'm sorry. Horoscope columns are based on an astrological worldview and usually interpret the impact of the moon's position along with the faster moving planets. Now, when I say a horoscope column, I mean like in the newspaper, where you have the 12 signs, and you're like, Virgo, let me see what it says for today. Okay, that's the other question I get is it okay for me to read my horoscopes for fun? Can I read my horoscope column in the magazine or the newspaper for fun? Okay, and my answer always is, keep in mind this is based on an astrological worldview. God forbids astrology and denounces it. And even though it seems kind of innocent, like you can just read it for fun and not believe it, you're kind of giving some kind of homage to it when you read it. Plus, you could be reading it every day for fun, and one day it might be accurate. And then you start getting interested. Then the next day you think, I just want to see what it says for today, because it was right. Yesterday it told me I'd get a letter from an old friend, and I did. I want to see what it says today. Now, I have talked to people who ended up going to an astrologer because the horoscope column got them hooked. And they started wanting to know more. It was like, well, reading these little things, these little tidbits every day is not enough for me. I want more information. So it can lure some people on that path. I have some resources here. Of course, my website, I have an article called Horoscopes to Read or Not to Read. And the Piscean Jesus, an article on astrology. I have a chapter on astrology in my book, Spellbound, The Paranormal Seduction of Today's Kids, which you can't get from the publisher anymore. You get it from sellers, like on Amazon. I have a chapter on it in a book called Global Wizardry, which is actually a very good book. It's very interesting. I have an entry in this other book. Anyway, you can see what I have here. So basically, what I was trying to show you is what astrology is, the worldview there. The Age of Aquarius seems so exciting. It's kind of like a counterfeit of the Christian expectation of Christ. We have this hope, which is a sure thing. It's not just hoping like a secular hope. It's hope in the Bible. It's the biblical terms in the New Testament means it's a sure thing. It's an expectation. It's more than a hope of Jesus' return and knowing the ending of the story, so to speak. So this is like a counterfeit hope because they see it in this very positive light, this Age of Aquarius, that things will be better. There'll be this peace. There'll be this brotherhood. We'll transcend these boundaries. We'll use these special powers. So it's this counterfeit hope. And of course it's based on lies. It's based on something that's false. So we want people, if you talk to someone who's not a Christian who is into astrology, you can find out a little bit maybe why they like astrology, but I would urge you not to focus that much on denouncing astrology to a non-Christian as using it as a platform for talking about who Jesus is. So I would try to ask them about who they think Jesus is. And that's why I spent a lot of time here on the the Avatar of the Age of Pisces, because they might have that view. So I'm trying to give you information to help you respond. Okay, so I was going to stop earlier, but we still have a good 10 minutes for questions, if you have questions. Yes?
So when you were having those experiences, are demonic experiences or fluid experiences, was it like euphoric, or was it something that was very like obvious was going on?
Yeah, it was euphoric, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I felt connected to the chart. I felt a connection there. See, it wasn't to the person I was talking to, like if I was doing his chart or your chart. It wasn't like I was connected to you. I was connected to your chart. And so I'm reading the chart for this person, and it's this connection here, it's not here. So the chart is almost like this intermediary, but what's going on here is the information is coming from my response and what's happening as I look at the chart. And it would make me feel guided, like it's revealing information about the person, and I am getting all this stuff. And the person would be sitting there affirming it, usually. And there's several reasons for that. Some is that, okay, there's going to be things just coincidentally that are true. There's going to be selective memory of the client, so the client goes home. And then maybe, let's say I said in the chart to you that you're going to have a big change in your job in the next 3 months. Well, okay, a lot of people have big changes in their jobs over a 3-month period. So you get a new boss, and you're like, wow, the astrologer told me I was going to have a big change. And this can go for individual things about the person's life, too. So there's that kind of, and they'll forget the things I said that were wrong. So there's selective memory and selective listening. There's coincidence, and there's a demonic element. When I would get information that was very specific that I couldn't have possibly known.
Wow.
Yes?
Yeah, also just an observation of you. You could have someone from China doing their chart here, sitting over here. You could have somebody doing, from India, the Vedic chart over here. You could have you doing the chart over here, and they're all going to contradict each other because the constellations are different. The precession of the equinoxes, which you brought out, so you're not ever even born under those anyway. The attributes and characteristics attributed to those signs were actually the Greek gods who died and went up and became the planets in some Greek mythology. So if you're born under that sign, then you have their attributes. But there was something that was important. The Magi were from Persia, modern-day Iran. The Jews had already been there in captivity, so they were familiar with the star out of David, or a star out of Jacob. They followed the star, but it led them to Herod, who wanted to kill Yeshua Jesus. It didn't lead them to, and that's really important when talking to astrologers. Also, in Psalm 19 and Romans chapter 1, which are parallel passages, you have, in a lot of ways, because you have God's way of, for times and seasons, but that the heavens declare the glory of God, all of that for reveal that there is a creator, and then you have the perversion of it with the corrupt mind worshiping the created things with, it doesn't say the heavenly bodies, but it's implied, the same thing. So putting that into perspective, and most astrologers that I talk to, they have no concept of actually a personal creator who created the things that they're getting their information from, which, is so self-defeating.
Right. They're looking at creation, not the creator. Right. Yeah.
The prophet Daniel and his legacy from Babylon when the children of Israel were taken into captivity, and the connection with the wise men. I mean, I understand there's some sort of a historical link.
Well, I don't know if there. Yeah. I think that's a speculation. Okay. It could be correct. Yeah. But I think when the star that David he mentioned, that's not a literal star. So I don't know that we don't. Here's the bottom line. We don't know why they thought this star was going to lead them to a king. There's a lot of speculation on that. There's one thing that we know is not true, and there's people who try to use stars and planets what they try to say is, well, these are really interpreted in a Christian way, and there's a Regulus or something like that, which is the royal star, and they say that was it. Well, there's no evidence for that, plus it got that name way later. So that particular thing is not true. There's some man who did a video on the Magi and stars.
The Star of Bethlehem.
Huh?
The Star of Bethlehem.
Yes, the Star of Bethlehem. I watched that video 3 times, and I took notes on it, and I wrote an article disagreeing with it. He says a lot of things. It's a mixture of things that are not true I'm not saying he's lying. I think he believes them. And actually using kind of an astrological worldview, reading a meaning into the stars. And that is not, you can't look at a star and get a meaning from it, other than physical data. So, anyway, I wrote an article about that because I was very disturbed by that video. It was very popular. A lot of Christians like it. It sounds very good. But listening to it as a former astrologer, it was disturbing. So I did not like that. Yes?
So you mentioned, I don't know if I said it right, tarot cards. I mean, is that all part of this, or is that...
Tarot cards are a form of divination. Do you all know what tarot cards are? They're cards with images on them, and people set it out and they do a reading for you, and they're supposed to tell you about your life, according to what cards show up. Tarot cards are a form of divination because you're reading a meaning into this picture that doesn't really have much meaning. I mean, it could be a guy holding a sword or something. Well, it could mean a lot of things. But there's this esoteric meaning with tarot cards, kind of a traditional meaning, like with astrology. And they really believe that the cards that come up during the reading, when they're doing the reading for you, they really believe the right cards are showing up connected to your life. Not to his life, not to his life, but to your life. And if I did a reading for him, different cards would come up. So tarot cards are a form of reading a hidden meaning where there is no apparent meaning and no rational basis for a meaning. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Are there other questions, anybody? This is a quiet side of the room. Okay, yes.
Page 2 talks about an age lasting about 2,000 years, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
And then it says the Age of Aquarius began in the late 20th century and is expected to be
Did I say
completed
late? Yeah,
in
late
21st.
20th century. That's right. Yeah.
So you're talking 2,000 year length.
Approximately.
Or approximately 1 century in another instance.
Wait, did I get my numbers wrong?
Well, it says...
Wait,
well,
isn't 2,000 years 20 centuries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I can be wrong about
Well,
things like that.
no, but it says that beginning in the 20th century and ending in the 21st.
Okay, let me see what I said. Let me look
That's,
where you're talking.
toward the bottom.
Maybe I worded something wrong.
Toward the
That's
bottom
very
of page
possible.
2, the one that says views differ.
Oh, views differ. Okay, began in the late 20th century, and our entry into this age is a continual process to be completed sometime in the 21st century.
That'd be the entering would be concluded at some
Yes,
point.
yes. It could take, in other words, it could take 100 years or so to make the full transition. Does that make sense? So it could start, let's say, 1980 or something, and then, you know, we're kind of entering the Age of Aquarius, and that might go till 20. I forget what year. That's so bad.
It was 1965 when the harmonic convergence happened.
Well, a lot of people think that,
Yeah.
and then and other people tie it to a certain planet.
Because we had hair tell us.
But yeah, because we're entering the Age of Aquarius, right? How many of you know that song? I bet people under 35
They don't get
know it. I bet you all don't know it, you people under 35. Who's over 35 in this room? Okay, do you all know about the Age of Aquarius song? Okay, so the people did shaking their heads. Okay, there was a musical called Hair, and one of the big popular songs from that movie, it was kind of a hippie type thing, not a movie, a musical. And one of the songs was, "This is the age," I can't sing. This is the dawning of the Age of Aquarius, Age of Aquarius. And the words don't even really make sense. Like when Jupiter aligns with Mars and something enters the first house. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But
The fifth dimension.
the fifth dimension, thank you. I couldn't remember the group. It was the fifth dimension, which was a really big group then. And but that song kind of became part of the cultural milieu. And people would say, "Oh, it's the Age of Aquarius," or the song was played a lot everywhere. It was very popular, and so people still refer to it. So yeah, you could have the Age of Aquarius starting somewhere in the late, 20th century and taking 100 years. And it really views vary among astrologers, and they use different markers for determining that and their own views. So.
And you can tell we're actually in it now because there's so much love and peace and harmony and no war, and we're so much more evolved and gentle and kind and sweet and loving towards one another, right? Yeah. The world is just getting better and better and better.
Well, you know what? One of the other views of the New Age is that there's going to be earth changes, big earthquakes and disasters on Earth that will take away people who are not ready to evolve spiritually.
Weeding out the
and the spiritually evolved people or the people ready to evolve will be left, and that's when you can have the brotherhood and peace. And we haven't had the big earth changes yet. Okay, any more final quick questions? Anything? Yes.
You brought up the harmonic conversion, what he did.
Yeah.
1988, because of the younger ones, what happened in 1988 with
Yeah,
the
or was it
vortex?
86?
I think it was 88, or maybe 86, but the vortexes and these special places.
The harmonic convergence was when these certain planets were aligned a certain way, and I can't even remember now how they were aligned. And it was a very widespread belief that at the time of the harmonic convergence, there was a shift in consciousness on the earth. It was like something opened up so that this higher understanding would enter people who were ready for it. And a lot of people had different, ways of putting it or different interpretations. This is how I and the man I was married to at the time actually, and people went to certain places that were considered places of special energy to observe the harmonic convergence.
Right.
And we lived in Atlanta at that time, in Athens, Georgia, where the University of Georgia is, which is only an hour or so from Atlanta. There's a little mini Stonehenge. And Stonehenge, of course, is considered very, New Agers love it in England. And some mysterious man had come to the town, I'm not sure when, 10 or 20 years before, and had built this strange little Stonehenge place, and it had these sayings on the side of it that about humanity. And it's very New Agey. And so we heard some people were going to gather there the morning of this day of a harmonic convergence, and you had to be there before sunrise. And we went to a motel in Athens, got up early, and our son, poor little Jeffrey, was, I think he was about 5. He was 5 years old, and he was half asleep. And we drove out to this farm land where this little mini Stonehenge was, and there was about 50 or 60 people there. And it was, the sun hadn't come up, and everybody sat there and meditated until the sun came up, and then people had brought snacks, and we all shared snacks, and that was observing the harmonic convergence. And you were supposed to meditate so that you could kind of focus on the energy coming in. It was a really, really big deal. Wasn't it?
I remember that.
Very big
and
deal.
Sedona was a big. There was a lot of coverage.
Sedona's so New Age.
In Ojai, California.
Ojai. And there's a lot of New Age places, Boulder, and
But
they're all now New Age is mainstream. That could be another talk, but I've got to stop. So thank you very, very much.